The other sort of clue is the patterns, whether you call them patterns of giving reasons, or you just observe that if they say this, then they say that, and we have interpretations of these various sentences which go right to their connections with the world. On the one hand, we also have some idea of which they think of, which of these supports others. That both of these have to fit together for us to get a coherent picture of what they're talking about. Now, you say, well, suppose that we don't find a very good fit. I mean, within our own apparatus, it's not only that we haven't found it, but I think you want me to imagine that we couldn't. I mean, it's not there. Now, what should I say? Well, there's no point in asking me in a vacuum what I'd say. I mean, we understand other people just more or less, even when we speak as we put it the same language. There's some things we get, some things we don't get. Now, maybe that's the case here, or maybe the case here is it's so bad that I'm just not sure of much of anything about what I'm making. And there are just all these different degrees, it seems to me.
Yes, I wanted there to be no exact fit with our language. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't fit any of the ordinary connectives that we use. We can't find it, or even a complex translation,
right,
that would make it all right. But nevertheless, there's a perfectly clear regularity. You can, if you take the trouble, work out what are the forms of inference that they do accept and what are the ones that we should accept that they don't. You could even perhaps, if you wanted to take the trouble, formalize the logic that they were using, give the rules of inference for their language. Now, I mean, in Wittgenstein, there are frequent remarks to the effect that, I mean, you must never say that people reasoned wrongly, not individuals, but a whole community, right? Can't say that they reasoned wrongly. They reason as they reason, because the way they reason fixes the meanings of the logical connectives that they use. And that's the idea that as long as you had any, let me say, coherence, so as to rule out the possibility of actual inconsistency, any coherent set of rules, even if they're not our rules, there will be a perfectly good meaning. The meaning is simply meanings for the logical constant. The meanings are fixed simply by the rules that are observed. Now, and I was asking you whether that latter was your position. Would you say you can understand it perfectly, understand their language perfectly well? Of course, we can't translate it exactly into ours, but here are the ways they use these logical constants. They go by these rules and exclude those. Or has it got to be translatable into our language?
My view is yes. It does have to be translatable.
You're some kind of chauvinist.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is the notions of thought, language, meaning, and so forth are our notions. They're not something that was given to us by heaven. We have these notions, and so we're the judge of whether something counts as rational thought, by which I mean thought.
Yes, but it seems to me that you...
So we're all chauvinists in that sense. Our concepts are our concepts.
Of course, the concept, of course our concepts are our concepts, and the concept of thought is a concept that we have. But I don't think that we can go quite so far as you have done, if I have understood you, in claiming to confer meanings on the words of our language and to deny that others might confer meanings which don't fit ours exactly in the same way. That's as far as I understood you, the meanings of the logical constants in our language are just fixed by the ways we've learned to reason that involve them. We just do this. We observe certain principles of inference, essentially. But if you have some other people who have some slightly different principles which don't exactly fit ours, you don't say, oh well, they've given their logical constants different meanings which are shown by their observing these rules. You say, we can't translate them into our language, and that means they don't really mean anything definite at all. That's why I call you a chauvinist.
No, look, you seem constantly to forget that these propositions, which are being inferred from each other, also have their connections with the world, and I've got to be able to make those out also. And I make those out by seeing how people act in the world. And if that doesn't fit, I haven't got any clue to the contents of the things which are being connected by the logical connectives. So these things have got to go together. And if I can't make any sense of how they go together, then so far I haven't been able to see them as propositions that they're dealing with. If I say, this sentence has such and such a content, then I want to see, well, is it for this person related in certain ways to other propositions? Now, if they're not, then I'm not going to say they just reason differently than I do. I say those aren't the propositions I thought they were. So we can't just ignore the contents of the propositions and look at the patterns of inference, because we don't even see it as inference. We just see it as a formal system.
Oh, look, people have argued, I mean, this brings us back to mathematics again, I suppose, but people have argued about the validity of certain forms of, sophisticated forms of inference. Axiom of choice is essentially, it's a rule of inference. People argue quite bitterly, is that valid or is it not valid? Now, there was no real question about whether they understood, or if there was a question, it was, again, a very highly sophisticated question about whether they understood the rest of the language. All right. It was a matter of arguing about what the quantifiers really mean, and then they had to appeal to ideas they had about what quantifiers ought to mean, and so on. So it's perfectly possible for people to disagree about, even to be shown that they ought to accept a certain rule as valid, which they hadn't previously thought of as valid, in accordance with the meanings they already attached to the words. It isn't that one can say, well, I give these people up.